So I'm thrilled to do another night with our good friends over at ASMP. This is maybe our third or fourth time that we've done this over the years, it feels like. We're very glad to do that. I see a lot of new faces, so we'll put it in the chat room. We have a YouTube channel that we'd love for you to subscribe to. So if you would, that would be great. That would help us out a lot. We thank our sponsors, which is Pro Photo Daily, Epson, Photo Shelter, and American Photography. We have three members of ASMP who will be presenting tonight. We have Lisa Kachajian, Alex Tolipan, and Helen Glazer will start us off. But before we start us off, we are going to have the new minted president of ASMP to give us a couple of words of wisdom about the organization and the membership and why it's so wonderful to be part of this organization. Ted, it's all yours.
Thanks, Frank. That's high praise. I don't know where I'm going to go after that. But yes, I'm Ted Andreasian. I'm the new president of ASMP New York. We're a national organization. We advocate for, we educate, we create community for photographers and image makers. We're broadening the definition a little bit, but to include other image makers. And at the national level, we do things like have legal and business education. There is information on the national website that helps set up your business and answer copyright questions, other kinds of legal questions. There's finding clients with Find a Photographer on the website, and an ever expanding list of ASMP corporate sponsorships and partnerships that bring members special deals and offer some valuable resources. It's all under the member benefits page on the website. And we advocate in Washington for members, especially when it comes to things like copyright. One other quick thing that we have some events coming up. There's the Big Brain Trust. If you're not familiar with that, it's available on the website. I'm going to put the events page in the chat so you can take a look there. And we have an AI tools panel discussion. It's kind of like scratching the surface and getting started with AI, understanding that it's not as difficult as it seems like it is, but at the same time, it's not as easy as people try and make it out to be. If you're interested in joining or you want to get some more information, you can send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat also. And after that, let's get started. You can sign up on the website for the newsletter, and that'll keep you in the know of what's going on with ASMP. Here's the link to our events page that gives you a little bit more information of what we're doing. And I'll stick my email there in a couple of minutes. All right, Frank, here you go.
Great. Thanks, Ted. That was terrific. It is really a great organization, and there's a lot of good people running it, and we're thrilled to collaborate whenever we can.
Yes, and we need to say that how great that Frank has been over the years working with us. As far as we're concerned, both you and I, there's nobody better in this business than Frank. So.
Enough of the love fest here.
But it's all true.
Thank you very much, Ted. With that, Helen Glazer will start us off tonight. So share your screen, Helen, and off you go.
All right, good. Thank you. All right, so most of the work that I'm going to talk about tonight comes from my National Science Foundation Antarctic Artist and Writers Program project. And this is the subject of a solo traveling exhibition called Walking in Antarctica that's midway through a 5-year tour of U.S. museums and galleries through the Mid-America Arts Alliance. They have a traveling exhibition service called Exhibits USA. And the slide is not advancing. Oh, here. There we go. Okay, great. Right now, it's at the Roger Tory Peterson Institute in Jamestown, New York. And from there, it's going to the University of Oklahoma. And there are still bookings available. these photos are from the Fairfield University Art Museum in Fairfield, Connecticut, a year ago.
And Helen, could you just like quickly tell us about this exhibition service?
Yeah, so Exhibits USA has been around for, I think, something like 50 years, and they rent exhibits to small and medium-sized museums in the continental US. So that's a way for these smaller organizations or college art galleries to get quality exhibits that they don't have a big staff to produce. And they take care of everything. They build crates. They, like you see shelves here, they build the shelves. They send everything to the venue. They send the wall labels, wall text, um, and it makes it very easy for people to just take it out of the box and install it in their space. And then they also do all the marketing and sales for it, which is for the artist is really wonderful. And if the venue wants to have me come and talk, then they arrange that with me separately. So I have given talks. I gave one at Fairfield. That one's on their YouTube channel. Um, and
And that's called Exhibitions USA.
Exhibits USA.
Exhibits USA. All right,
Yeah, it's
so after
EUSA.org.
okay, after you speak, if you could put that in the chat room, because it will be helpful to some other folks.
Oh, sure,
Great.
sure.
Okay, continue. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Helen.
yeah. So I premiered this at Goucher College in Baltimore, and then I eventually got Exhibits USA to pick it up, and they started traveling it in 2022, and they have everything till 2027. And I structured the exhibition as a series of walks through different kinds of Antarctic landscapes. And I also included a first person audio tour that is hosted on a website so people can access it on their cell phone in the gallery and hear me talk about what they're looking at. And as you can see, the exhibition includes some photo-based sculpture that was derived from 3D scans. And I use a process called photogrammetry that is based on still photos, and I'll describe it a little later. So this presentation, I'm just going to talk to you. I'm feeling like this is an audience of photographers. So I'm going to talk from more of the point of view of some of the challenges that I think, any of us face when we're working on location, especially in a remote location, and just have to be flexible and resourceful. When I first heard about the Antarctic Artists and Writers Program, my reaction was, Antarctica? Isn't it all flat and white? Like, what would an artist even do there? This is my mental picture. So indeed, obviously I did see some places like this, but when I did more research, I realized that where the main scientific base is and where some of the scientists are working, there's glaciers and icebergs and mountains and other forms that I was already interested in. To back up a little bit in terms of my background, so about 20 years ago, I was making work like this. I actually did study photography along with painting and drawing when I was an undergraduate at Yale, but I went on to become a painter at first, got my MFA in painting. And then by the early 2000s, I was making hand-modeled wall reliefs that I was casting and painting. And I used photography as a reference. So, for example, this series took inspiration from a photo I took of one of those large Japanese koi fish coming up for air in a pond. And I was inspired by forms in nature. And then I started to wonder, well, why do they look the way they do? And what accounts for the way the landscape looks the way it does? And the different kinds of structures in animals and plants. And so I started reading books on science for the layperson. And that led me to explanations of complexity theory, which helped me see that there are underlying rhythms and patterns in what at first glance looks random. And I got really intrigued by pictures of fluid dynamics experiments and reading the explanations as to what was happening in order to cause these particular patterns. And fluid dynamics studies how air or water moves through space. And the more I understood about this, I could see the same patterns enacted on a grand scale up in the sky through the clouds. So at that point, photography became my preferred medium because I was no longer interested in what my mind would invent. I wanted to capture what was there in all its detail, and photography was really the way to do that. So for a few years, I was printing my photographs. This is 40 inches high. And I was adding some subtle hand coloring to bring out those movements through space and these uh, what they call fractal forms, which are forms that repeat from small to large on a different scale in a particular place. And as for Antarctica, um, the more I thought about it, I reasoned that ice, being after all a frozen fluid, would present the same kinds of forms that I was working with the advantage that they weren't constantly in a state of transformation. I could get up close to them, I could move around them, and you can't do any of that with a cloud. Um, my intuition proved right that I would find the kinds of forms I already was interested in working with. And it's not a huge leap between the clouds on the left and this photograph I took inside of an ice cave in Antarctica on the right.
Hmm.
So I prepared for my trip by looking at every photo I could find, but I was still constantly surprised by what I found when I got there. Um, my application said that I would be photographing how wind and water shaped the Antarctic landscape, and that I would produce prints, and where possible, I would make 3D scans. But I was constantly responding to unexpected subjects and opportunities that presented themselves. So this is Mount Erebus with a sea ice pressure ridge in front of it. Um, and Erebus is an active volcano that dominates the landscape. And although, given its sort of wide profile there, you might think it's not very tall, but it's actually 12,500 feet high. And it's just distance is very hard to judge in Antarctica because you don't have the cues that you have here, like trees or human infrastructure in between. So this is miles and miles away, a different side of Erebus. Um, and here I'm on the sea ice, and I had the opportunity to visit the ice cave. So in front of the mountain
Hello.
there, that white wall, that's a
Uh,
side of the
I'm
Erebus
okay. I just
ice
have a quick
tongue.
question for you.
Oh, sorry.
No, that was somebody else. So what format are you shooting these on, Helen?
I was using a digital camera, Nikon D810 at the time.
Okay. And just a question. I mean, it's interesting to listen to you because you sound like a scientist on some
Whoops.
level, right?
Uh-huh.
And you sound like an adventurist on another level, and now
Uh-huh.
and a photographer. How does that all work for you when you go on this type of an adventure?
Um, I think that's one reason I kept applying to this program even after I got rejected a few times, because it just kind of appealed to me to go to this remote place that just seemed so alien and different and special. And so I guess I am just drawn to that. And I guess I do have a nerdy side that likes to understand how things work. And so
Which is not bad, which is
no,
wonderful.
I'm
Yeah.
not apologizing for
Yeah.
it. It's just, it is who I am. I mean, I think that's true. Um, and look, I think understanding the science just enriched what I saw. I just was seeing things I didn't notice before. And then so there uh right by the white wall there, you can see this little cluster of those are people in red parkas near the entrance to this cave. So it's inside this glacier, and so you had to speaking of adventure, you had to like go up to this little opening that was about 3 feet high, slide in on your belly. They told us you're going to go down about 8 feet and then you'll be able to stand up. And there we were. So now I'm looking back out. And then I was also taking these close-ups of things that I just thought were really interesting, like ice hanging from the ceiling just inside the cave. Um, and so that, go ahead.
Yeah,
You,
and how many people on the adventure here? You know,
I think there were probably about 20 of us, and they brought us
wow,
in two different groups.
groups.
They had us in there for about 20 minutes. We were there with a mountaineer, and they had lit the place up, bringing in a group. But I had a logistics person who said, well, if you liked what you saw, you can go back by yourself with Mountaineer. I was like, definitely, without other people around and without it all lit up because it's pitch black inside. And
Right.
so he brought a lamp. And what I realized is I tried taking a few pictures with the flash, and they were kind of uninteresting, really. Just looked like a lot of ice. And then, but when he was moving his lamp around, I could see the possibilities of backlighting them or using it as like a bounce light off the walls. And so I started art directing him, which was fun for him. And I got pictures that really show that structure and that detail, and also kind of revealed more color than just washing it with white light.
So Helen, as you're going through this, I mean, you're becoming a better photographer or a more knowledgeable photographer as you get into these environments,
Right. That's
right?
true.
You're learning lighting, you're learning this, you're absorbing all of that. So how does that affect you as an artist, who came from this place and then this place and now you're here? How does that work for you? And that may
Yeah, I
be
mean,
more of an emotional question.
yeah. Well, I think, um, I was that's the great thing about digital photography is you can get that instant feedback and then, figure out what's working and what isn't, and just yeah, find out things just through experimenting. I think having been has spent 5 years photographing clouds was actually good preparation. I was thinking about that today because the clouds, you just had to really respond. They were moving all the time, and then you just started to observe how they act, I guess, so to speak, um, and just how to kind of use the camera quickly to get what you want. So I think I wasn't totally new to all this at the time, but I had just bought the camera a few months before. I decided it was once I got the grant, it was time to get a better camera. I had a D80, so I went up to a D810, and the autofocus was definitely worth the price of admission. So, um, and then like for instance, the mountaineer asked me to take this picture because he wanted to show his friends back in Alaska how huge the ice crystals were in this ice cave. He said they'll never believe this.
And how cold is it? What's the temperature there?
Well, being in the ice cave was like being in a walk-in freezer. I could only stand it for about an hour, but outside it was usually in the mid 20s, which wasn't bad if the wind wasn't blowing hard. So they give you clothing to use, outerwear that's appropriate for that environment. And but sometimes it could feel really cold, especially when you have on like thin gloves so that you can work your camera.
Mm.
Sometimes I just have to warm up my hands, but I wasn't having trouble with battery life or anything like that. I was concerned about that, but it wasn't bad in that respect. And so this is a sea ice pressure ridge. And also being there and being around scientists, I got to ask them, like, what is this? What causes this? And people would, explain to me, like, that's multi-year sea ice that's been rafting up towards the shore. And this is an unusually large one, too. Like, there are ice pressure ridges, Great Lakes or something, but that's an unusually big one. And then I got to go spend a week in a place called the Dry Valleys. So here now, I got there in mid-November of 2015. Now, about a month later, there were melt pools forming on top of the sea ice. So it was transforming because it was summer. Um, and the Dry Valleys is the largest ice-free area of Antarctica. And it um, is, this is a kind of a typical scene where you have this gravel um, environment and then glaciers that spill down the mountains into valleys. And then on either side, those flat white areas are permanently frozen lakes. And they're very deep, like 80, 100 feet deep, but the layer of ice on top is about 16 feet thick. And so on the left, kind of behind that hill is a field camp called Lake Hoare. And by the way, that's, I always tell people Hoare, don't worry. And then on the right is Lake Frixel. And one day, I did hike over with a field camp assistant over the top of that glacier and back onto the other side. And then we got onto the ice and went up to this little area here. And I'll show you that in a second. But here's Lake Hoare, and here's the field camp, and probably the prettiest field camp I've ever seen. And that's my tent. So when you're visiting a field camp, everybody gets their own tent to sleep in. And there's a wooden hut that where people can cook and access electricity and look at their laptops and so forth. So
And you ever
yes.
think and I'm not sure if this is a dopey question. Could you
Yeah.
use a drone? Could you use a drone there as well?
No, it's not a dopey question. I mean, there weren't drones at the time, but I know that I have talked to a geologist who's been there since, and he did show me pictures he had taken with a drone. But I think they're very careful about permitting. They're
Mm,
they're very in use of drones because they don't want things crashing and
yeah.
getting lost in the landscape. There's an Antarctic treaty that kind of governs all international organizations that use it. It's only for peaceful scientific purposes, and they're very strict about waste disposal and trying not to interfere with this environment at all. So, but they do let scientists use drones now, and that would have been a really great way to do this. It would have been easier to do the photogrammetry that way, probably.
Right.
Um, so this is the Canada Glacier from the side. Now I'm on Lake Frixel, and I'm heading down towards this little area there. And here it is close up.
Mm,
And that's, I wish I had paid more attention to trying to figure out how tall things were. But my memory, I think it was probably about, like a three-story building at least.
mm,
Um, I didn't know how successful I would be scanning anything really big until I got there, and I made a few attempts in different places and realized by the time I got here, I knew that I had a good shot at getting a good scan of this. I made 160 photos of this. Actually, I made, I think, about 300, but then I used about 160 of them. And this is the sculpture
ah,
that I generated. It's 5 feet wide and 15 and a half high and 17 and a half deep. And then I painted it. This one was carved on a router that can read 3D files. And again, I will tell you more about that process in a sec, but let's see. And so then another place that was a surprise is uh, once people at Murdo understood what my project was about, someone said, well, if you're going to the Dry Valleys, ask them to take you to see the ventifacts. And so the ventifacts are wind-eroded rocks. And there are ventifacts all over the world, but they're usually much smaller. These are gigantic boulders, and just walking around them, I called it the Surrealist Sculpture Garden. I kept thinking about things like on the left that looked like a seated figure by Henry Moore to me, in the middle looked like an Easter Island head. But then walking around the other side, all that illusion just totally disappeared. And again, this is really huge rock. Again, probably the size of a two-story building at least, maybe
Wow.
taller. And then walking around behind that, I had a nice little view framing this mountain in the distance. Um, and then this one, though, I could see enough
Wow.
of it. I think it was probably about 5 to 6 feet high. So I could see, my camera could see the top of it. So I was able to really get a good scan of this whole formation, which I named it the bird vent effect. And
Mm.
so here's an example of a photo set where I've taken a series of photos that overlap. And then the photogrammetry software can read the focal length of your lens from the metadata and match the points, and then generates a really good 3D digital recreation of this form. And that can then be brought into 3D modeling software and cleaned up. And notice it also captures the color information. And so once I close up all the holes and make a bottom for it, I could put, I 3D printed it in sections and glued them together, and then I painted it. So these are two views of the sculpture. And to me, uh, the advantage from the point of view of a viewer is they're not stuck with just the one that I chose to make a print of. They can actually walk around it and get an experience of the whole form from any angle. And that's
Yeah. Yeah.
30 inches in diameter. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, Helen. So this is, I mean, for you, this must be such a wonderfully creative experiment,
Yeah.
adventure, right? I mean, you're getting to paint, you're getting to sculpt, you're getting 3D. I mean, you're going in all different places. Your head, must be like bouncing, like cylinders in a car. It must be wonderful for you.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean,
Just the
it
way
was.
you're smiling now, you look like a child. It's so nice.
Yeah, I mean, it was really exciting. And, just every day I was thinking, gosh, I mean, I don't even know what to expect next. And, you know, and, and of course, you prepare for these things and you're anxious ahead of time, like, okay, I got 7 weeks and I got to get this. But once I saw that things were happening and I was adapting to it, and I was getting along with people because, like, you're living in a field camp or you're living in a dorm, and
So it's 7 weeks with the same group.
no, no, there were people changing. I mean, I was at back and forth between McMurdo Station, and then like I was at a field camp in the Dry Valleys for a few days, then I went to a different field camp, this one at Lake Hoare. Um, I went to a penguin colony. I spent a few days there. I went
Wow.
to a camp where there were biologists who were collecting specimens from the ocean floor. And then, in between, I was in a dorm at McMurdo, and eating in a cafeteria was sort of like being a freshman in college again. So, yeah, it was all that. But I did make friends there, and I have some people I'm still in touch with, which is really nice. Um, And then at Lake Hoare also, I walked onto the ice, accompanied by a soil scientist who was very experienced with all that. And I looked at these ice formations on top of the lake. And they're, what happens is the gravel from the hills blows onto the lake, but also the ice forms at the bottom of the thick layer, and at the top, in extreme cold, it can just go straight from solid to gas without passing through a liquid phase. So I discovered all these weird little pavilions that I also had never seen photographs of, and um, I was crouching and photographing inside them because they weren't very tall, just a few feet. And then I was sometimes pointing my camera straight down where these thin layers of ice had formed on the gravel that had blown onto the lake. And like this one I named
Look
Skua.
at the bird. My God.
Yes, exactly. You
God, you see
got
that
it.
in
I
the
didn't even have
section.
to tell you. That's great.
Ah,
Yeah.
my
I
God, that,
call, yes, that's exactly what I thought.
sheesh. You made it easy for us. I mean, uh,
And then just taking advantage of the same day that I did that very strenuous hike over the glacier to photograph the side on Lake Frixel. We were out hiking all day long. It's just me and this other woman who served as my guide. And then we came back, and I was pretty tired that night, but I was like looking at the photos on my laptop, and then just noticed that it was like 11:30, but the light was just hitting the side of the glacier, and it was just gorgeous. And I just decided to stay up till 1:30 in the morning, walking around, photographing along the shore of the lake, so that you can see the glacier reflected in it. And then I got to go to some places that I just didn't have room to include in the show. And I think we probably all have this happen where, there's just things that just don't either fit the overall storyline or don't fit the space, of whatever it
mhm.
is we're producing in the end. But the NSF gave me, my logistics person applied for a permit for me to go up to this place called Blood Falls. And so I actually was able to get up close to it. And that guy in the picture is a senior program officer for the Office of Polar Programs. And he wasn't allowed because he didn't have a permit, because he just kind of came along with us spontaneously for the helicopter ride. But I got to go up close and take some pictures of this phenomenon that some kind of complex geological process that involves iron oxides and saline and stains the ice this orangey red color. And here's another one of my one-offs. I mean, I just thought this was so cool, but I just didn't have a place to fit it into the narrative. It's just a column of ice. It's just sort of frozen there off this glacier. And then this mummified seal, I did photograph about a half a dozen of these that I saw, but usually they were skeletons. So nobody understands entirely what happens, but they think during the winter, sometimes young seals lose their way and they crawl on their bellies for miles and miles and end up in the middle of the dry valleys and then starve.
Mhm.
But you can't tell by looking at them how old they are. You have to, I guess, analyze a tissue sample because they could be decades old, they could be centuries old, because there's nothing that decomposes uh, in the soil like there is here. And I did spend time, as I said, in a penguin colony with penguin scientists, and they're like downslope from Mount Erebus, and they live in this very volcanic landscape of these volcanic pillows that I've actually seen those kinds of formations on the Big Island in Hawaii too. So it's just a different kind of a landscape. It was a long-term study of penguins, and I did take a lot of pictures of penguins that I included them in the show, even though they have nothing to do with wind and water, because it's a show about Antarctica, and I felt that people would love to see penguins, and it's true that's a very popular part of the show. Um, and one of the pictures of penguins that I didn't make it in, but that I really like is this scientist at work. But it was used by a conservation organization in their magazine when they were doing a profile of her. Um, and so the next thing I just want to end with here is, what did I do with my book? The ASMP here it is. Hot off the press. I just got this on Friday. The ASMP Best of 2024 Awards. And I won for my current project as a series. I've been working since 2021 on a project in the Arctic this time that I'm working on a book proposal for now. But so it was definitely gratifying to get an award from ASMP in the travel category. And this project, I'm looking at a former U.S. air base in Greenland that was operated by the U.S. military from 1941 to 1992, and it was part of the Cold War monitoring system across the Arctic. And now there is a town whose economy revolves around this airport that the air base built, and tourism to some extent. And there's a lot of old military junk left behind, which some of it's taken to the junkyard. Some of it's repurposed. Uh, so that object in the upper right, that's a mock airplane crash for firefighter training. They set it on fire periodically. And so again, I'm looking at forces that transform landscapes. In this case, I'm also looking at climate change. So that's the Greenland ice cap that's below that picture. And there are visible impacts of climate change, not in that photo per se, but in other ones I've taken uh, over the past 20 years. The landscape has transformed. I've been doing research in archives, and so I have a lot of vintage photos. And so that's what I'm putting together now. And that's my next big project to assemble. And so I guess I just want to end by saying that, especially now, I mean, I guess I had this in my application. I've said this all along that I wanted to bring a pro-science, pro-conservation message to people, and that in addition to following my own artistic interests, that this is um, a way that I think photography has some power to, move people and connect them to faraway places. And I wanted to use the privilege of having been able to go there to do that. Um, and that's kind of keeping me going right now among the
Phenomenal.
events of the last few weeks, I'll have to say. But yeah, so anyway, this is where you can find out more about me. And
Right. One thing, Hal, you should go through the chat room because there's a couple of other questions and people want some information. So you could
okay,
put, your website in there and your email. That would really be good for everybody. But that's absolutely terrific, beautiful work. And no, Helen, you have a standing invitation to come back. When you have your next project, we'd
oh,
love to see it and your book and on and on and on. That's terrific. We all feel educated, I'm sure.
thank you very much.
So, with that, I thank you very much. And next up is Alex Tolipan. So, Alex, you get to share your screen once Helen unshares, and off we go. Helen, that's terrific. And hopefully you could stick around for questions afterwards. You're muted now, Helen.
Okay, I'm not unshared. How do I?
Well, maybe Jay can do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Helen,
There
it's
we go.
okay. You're no longer sharing. You're good.
Okay.
Good.
All right, Alex, you're up.
Um,
Great.
is everybody seeing what they're supposed to be seeing? Blue projections?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
First of all, wow, tough act to follow here. Helen, congratulations, amazing adventure, amazing project. I envy you. Well, having said that, I'll start telling a little bit about me. Most people here probably don't know me. My name is Alex. I'm Brazilian. Most of my life I was a lawyer. I start my photography journey while I was in law school back in 1994. I was a lawyer in Brazil. And I've been photographing as a hobby my whole life. About 7 years ago, my wife got offered a position here at UN Women, and we decided to move 2017, very end of 2017. So arriving here, I was faced with the choice of studying American law or taking photography as my new adventure, and that's what I decided. So ever since I've studied, I became a professional photographer here. I work mostly with restaurants and food photography and corporate events. But I decided to stretch a little bit my art and my imagination and artistic side. So I decided to take this project.
So Alex, how do you get, like, what is the moment in time where I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a photographer? What crystallized it for you?
Well, when I arrived here, when I arrived here in New York, I have closed up 10 years practice as a lawyer in Brazil. And arriving here, I have two opportunities: either work as well for the UN, which I tried for about 6 months, or start from scratch, basically, learn American law and do something here with it, which would imply doing a master's here. That would take another 2 years and a lot of money involved to get my bar permit. And I had a camera I just got as a gift a camera from my uncle, and brand new US 7D. So I decided to start working with that, and within a year I applied for a work permit and start shooting.
Okay.
So somewhere between the beginning of 2018 and November 2019, I veered onto photography. Well, the project I started thinking about was photographing the museums in New York, from exterior shots and interior shots. I had a clear vision of what I wanted to the photos to look like, but I started thinking, okay, so for this kind of photography, which is a external shot with where I basically tune out the rest of the city to show just the geometry and the architecture of the building, I arm myself with my confidence camera, my trusty EOS R5, and diffusers and a tripod, and went to photograph the Met and the Guggenheim. Now, I have to admit, the Met was a bit of a disaster for me because it's much bigger than I expected to be. Even with a 14 millimeter, it's difficult to get we can easily get the original wing, but the two modern wings, it's almost impossible to get with a single shot. But most important, the biggest challenge for me is that the architecture is not exactly what I wanted for the final look I wanted. So after freezing my hands off for a while, I decided to pack, go to a coffee place, heat up my hands, and move on to the Guggenheim Museum. The Guggenheim was more successful. Why is it not? Sorry. Okay. As you can see here, the Guggenheim was more successful. I did take some long exposure shots, but in the end of the shots taken handheld, closer to the building, were more to my liking than the overly prepared long exposures I did from across the street. So the three images I got from it that I'm like the most were handheld at 1/100 of a second, and I mostly worked it after all in post-production.
But you can see how that building, is so much more conducive, right, to creating art than the other one. I mean, although I'm sure, a number of architectural photographers would kill me for saying that, but the Guggenheim is such a beautiful building.
Yeah. Frank Lloyd Webber was inspired at
Yeah.
for the architecture, the lines, everything is conducive to a good photograph. The Metropolitan, I think I'm still going to try again when it's less cold and I'm more prepared. Perhaps a nice shot, I'll get what I want, and I'll have to accept taking smaller parts of it instead of taking the whole thing in one shot. Or perhaps I will venture renting a tilt shift camera and trying to do several exposures. Now, as I said, I was trying as well for an interior shot, and I like this shot, but I don't think it has the same. I don't think it follows the vision I had. So I decided not to do the interior shots. They are not very conducive to this sort of shot where I can isolate completely the architecture. So this was an example of what I had in mind, but I'm not sure how it worked. Perhaps if I cropped a little the interior, but it's not what I had in mind. So the project, it's morphing. I have to say the project is still going on. I haven't finished it.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, Alex, isn't that always the challenge?
Yeah,
Expectations versus reality,
exactly.
right? I mean,
Learning
you have
from
to change,
reality.
and it doesn't have to be bad that the reality is different from what you imagine, right? It's just part of the process. How do I still end up with great shots, but just something else from what I imagined?
Well, you adapt, and my adaptation in this case is to start choosing photographing more exterior of modern buildings.
Mm.
Buildings that instead of trying to fit something into what I see, to look for other types of building instead of just museums. So I went back, I gave it another try. One of the other problems I had in the mornings was very early in the morning and the lighting was not that good. There was still a lot of harsh shadows at this time. And the second shot, I was more happy on a sense, but there was a lot more bustling, more street bustling, more people. So I also left this shot behind.
Mm.
Now, the second shooting day was an exploration. I wasn't going with a tripod and diffusers. I just decided to explore for buildings in the High Line. And the first one I found was this one, which I really liked for the project. The building, it's called the Lantern House building. You can see it from the High Line. And I think it's easy to isolate and have very interesting lines. I mean, it's not Frank Lloyd Webber, but it's still a very interesting building. I took also I took a lot more than that, but I chose 3 shots, one detail shot here that I really like. The architect here is Thomas Heatherwick, which is the same architect as you're going to see later on of the vessel. Now, this building I like very much. It does create a bit of a challenge because there is a lot of flora in front of it, which in the winter it's just dead branches over there that it's very hard to raise. I'm not sure if I will incorporate or discard this one. I'm choosing. suggestions are welcome. I like this building very much. It doesn't have a particular name, but everybody apparently calls him the Highline Building. The architect is one Zaha Hadid.
Yep.
It's very interesting. I like the lines. I like the architecture for that project. I'm still thinking, and I will try to incorporate it. Perhaps details of the side instead of the whole.
So, I mean, Alex, some of those buildings, right? You must realize at some point I have to be up, I have to be low, I have to be here.
Yeah.
How does that challenge, work with you? I mean, what do you do?
Look, this building, as I said, this was a scouting. These photos came from a scouting, not a pre-planned approach. So when I saw them, I photographed from various angles, trying to see the back of the camera, what is working and what not. But in the end, the choices are made in the editing table. I have many more shots than that one. These are the shots that I think worked better for the editing. I was trying to isolate the building from the rest of the city and the rest of the environment. And so basically it's a trial and error approach. The shed, since I approached the shed, the shed directly from the High Line, it was the best shot from there because the High Line is a little higher. It's come directly to the entrance of the shed. If you come from the vessel, there's a lot of things in front, including the vessel itself. But if you come from the High Line, you almost pick everything clean. So it was not difficult to isolate the shed. I particularly love this shot. I think it isolated very well for the project. I had some work cleaning up the front of it to leave just the name. And the idea was to take off the exhibits that were showing, just to make it more timeless instead of making it very timed thing, right? I moved to the vessel. The vessel is another building I love to photograph and I love to see. I love the work. Again, I said it's Thomas Hedwig, but it does pose as a challenge in this context for me. First, it's difficult to properly isolate it, especially because it's see-through. You can see, if you look the next photo, you will see that you can see the building behind it. It's hard to isolate it from the building behind it without making it too dark. As I said, this was an exploration, so I may go back there with more intent to get better shots. But I really like this shot of the shed, in particular this one. Although
Is the vessel open these days?
no, it was closed when I passed
It's
there.
still closed.
They
Okay.
keep trying to open it, but then unfortunately somebody commits suicide and they have to close it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
It happened just 2 or 3 times already.
Yeah.
Now the obvious choice would go from Frank Lloyd Wright to Santiago Calatravas. These were a more intense shot. I went there with tripod and the filters and everything. And one of the funny things about this is I showed my daughter and she asked me if this was a check mark. Because really you look at it and yeah, it is a check mark. But anyway, sorry?
Yeah, what equipment are you using?
Always on Canon US R5 with 24 with, well, for this one with the 14-25 as the first one, but the ones at the vessel and the shed, I took 24-105 I have just left food photo shoot, and I was just taking the hike and looking for buildings. So they were shot more close range. This one I took off with the 14 to 35 4.0, and before that one, this is another shot. Again, I tried with the tripod and the long exposure, but I think the best shot was taken handheld at 1/100th of a second instead of a long exposure, honestly. This one posed a big challenge. This is the One Trade Center. It's a beautiful building for the work, but I photographed it during the day, and it's basically a big mirror. So if you see the right side of it, I went all dark in it because originally in the photograph, it has the perfect reflection of the building next to it. And for the edit I was looking for, I don't think I wanted the building to be showing if it's not there. I mean, if I'm cropping out and editing out the building, it didn't seem to me that makes sense to show its mirror image. I am not sure. I'm still a little bit back and forth on this one between leaving it all dark or just letting show the image. For now, I'm choosing this vision of the photo of the shoot.
That's always the challenge, right? What to leave in,
Yeah.
what to leave out, why,
Exactly.
you know.
And I may go back there and try another shot, perhaps during the night. I don't know. So this is the Calatrava. This is a detail I love. I simply love the curves of Calatrava's. I first met him in Brazil. Calatravas made the Museum of Tomorrow. It's a Calatravas in Rio, and I love to arrive here and find him again. So I love this this image. This is a bit of a cheat because this is a note picture I took in 2023 that I added, but it's a concept. It's a concept for me. I'm going to go back there at this place and retry this shot. This is not a new shot. It is an old shot that I edited to adapt. But within it's just for me to get an idea of what I'm going to do. Well, this was a project. I mean, it's ongoing. I'm working
Right.
for the portfolio development project at APA, and I'm working on several buildings. I also looking for this is, by the way, is Oscar Niemeyer and Wallace Harrison with the help of Corbusier and Niemeyer. And I've been researching buildings. One that's calling attention for me is in New Jersey. Is in Stamford. Is the One Square building in Stamford, which is also Oscar Niemeyer building. And I'm looking for others. Scouting.
Yeah, it must be wonderful. It's got to be wonderful to live in this part of the world where there's so much architect to shoot, right? I mean, you're only limited by how much time you have.
Yeah, there is no doubt. I mean, one of the reasons I picked that is because of how much good architecture. Although I'm not an architect, but I do love the art of building, and I love to photograph it. I have to say it also helps with the fact that I'm an introvert. I have problems finding people in the streets and looking and pointing the camera and hoping they're not going to attack me. So photographing buildings, they don't attack you, you know.
Yeah, I think you're making the right decision there. I think you, and so but thank you very much. It's a terrific
Didn't
presentation.
have time, so
And another thing, if you had gone into law, certainly people would be attacking you.
yeah,
So
yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
so you made the right choice all the way around. So thank you very much. And of course, Alex, when you have more work, we'd love to have you come back and show us more what you're doing. You should also check into the chat room. There's a couple of questions about tilt and shift that you may want to answer directly.
Okay.
All right. So thank you very much, and hopefully you could stick around for questions
I
afterward.
will. I will stay.
Great.
Thank you.
So next up is Lisa Kachajian, who is going to share her screen, and off we go. So let's get Lisa on. There she comes.
Here we go.
How are you, Lisa?
Okay, it's Kachajian, just so that
Sorry.
easy to say. The first few times is tough, I know.
Kach-
You're lucky. And so thank you, Frank. And thank you, Projections. Thank you, ASMP. Thank you, Frank Mayo. Thank you, Ted Andreasian, for inviting me to appear on Projections tonight and present my long-term project, Upcountry. Ongoing since 2019. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I first came to photograph at the farm for its beautiful views, pastoral landscape, and through it became rooted in the realization that this is a story about a rural way of life that may soon disappear. This photograph is Rhonda through the barn window.
So where are we, Lisa?
We are in northern New Jersey and in Woodcliff Lake in Bergen County, a former rural area, farming area. And there's still many farms, but this particular one was originally 85 acres and subdivided when the Garden State Parkway came through in late 1950s, 1956, and in 1962, this particular farm that was 85 acres was subdivided, and the agricultural manager who was working at the farm, 85-acre farm, purchased 5.5 acres and turned it into an egg farm, raising horses, pigs, donkeys, chickens, and horses. This image is Eric and the ponies. I found the farm seemingly untouched. It's a captivating time capsule, full of history and charm.
And Lisa, how did you find this actual farm? What got you there?
Well, I had driven past it for years, and actually early on in the early 2000s, bought a dozen eggs at the farm. On the honor system, you'd walk into the breezeway. That was an accident, but that's okay. I think I went too far, too fast. Purchased eggs. You'd stick your money in a little box and grab your eggs from the refrigerator and go, and you didn't see anyone. So it was very unusual, but the eggs were good, and I grew up near New York City. It was my only experience with farms was going up country, going into upstate New York, traveling to see rural areas. This I call Dusk on the Meadow. The 3 Welsh ponies that remained once the chickens were gone are Gritzy from left to right, Rhonda, and Kelly. A few yards away is the Garden State Parkway that subdivided the 85-acre farm. It looks very rural, but it's a suburban area. One of the things I found interesting about photographing here was, and I was invited, the first day I photographed at the farm, I was invited to come down and meet the horses and explore the farm. And Finn, the owner, sitting further at the end of the table, the one not doing the work, was invited me to come back and photograph whenever I wanted to. And through that invitation, I started getting to know the family and almost starting to help out on the farm as well. So photographing everyday occurrences and seeing how close knit the family is, that they seem to do everything together, gave me an idea of farm life. So I called this Many Hands, as in many hands make light work.
And just a curiosity question, did you see any young people on the farm?
The only no, there are no children in this family, which is one of the things that what happens to this farm
Right.
20 years from now, which is what I was thinking when I first started photographing. It wasn't something that I considered early on, that the photographs I was making there were going to be of any particular significance anytime soon. However, it was a chance for me to have project work that was uniquely my own, that I could really dig deep within myself as a photographer and make images of things I hadn't seen before, which was important to me, and become better at expressing what I saw.
And I think,
With
Lisa,
the camera.
yeah, I think you're being very generous in 20 years. These folks look older than that. Is there any discussion around what's going to happen?
Well, part of the problem was that when I first got there, the chickens had been, I started photographing in September 2019. And in December 2018, they sold off the chickens because it was becoming too much work to care for 500 chickens and run an egg business.
Wow.
The family here, pictured here when I first met them, Finn was 88. He's now in his early 90s, and as the whole family, late 80s, 90s, early 90s. So without any heirs, without any children, their extended family is in Denmark, and which was another thing that made this project unique. But there is very little talk about what happens in the future, other than once, and I'll come to it, but since you're asking, at some point in October 2021, the horses were put down, and as a result, they lost their agriculture assessment. So let me continue, but this is part of the everyday that you'd see at the farm. Finn would go down, change his shoes in the garage, both before he got started to work and before he went back up to the house. And he would come down to the garage to feed the ponies every afternoon. And that was something I also started to help him with after a period of time, participating in chores. This is Helen and Eric. They're a marriage of over 60 years, and I was taken by their affection for each other after an enduring marriage, a very long period of time. It's not something that I've seen this type of affection, and they're always holding each other's hands or arms, or when they're always sitting together. It really is quite enchanting in some ways. In the house, I was invited to take a look around early on, and this photo kind of gives me a sense now of reflecting on a couple of things: what happens in the future, the shadows of things to come, but also the poignancy of the room. It feels like one of the elements of the project that feels like a time capsule. Nothing has changed here. both Finn and Hella, brother and sister, grew up on farms and grew up on a farm. Their parents had grown up on farms in Denmark, and the lifestyle was very isolating. So in some ways, it feels like it's not. It's a different reality. But for me, this image gives an idea of what once was, sense of history, what might be in the future, and just the preserving the moment is important.
And what are you shooting with, Lise?
I have a variety of cameras that I've used. It really was whatever was accessible. Some are 28 millimeter lens, like a Q. Some is this particular one is a Leica Q, so 28 millimeter. Some of the other images are made with a A7 III with a 24-70, or sometimes I'd use lenses that my father had given me, Nikon lenses adapted to the Sony, or a Canon lens adapted to the Sony, really using whatever I can get my hands on, sometimes borrowing a camera or a lens. Because maybe to show a different point of view. Sometimes you want more detail. Sometimes you want something wider. Sometimes you need a lower light situation, and many of the photographs are made in the moment. This one is the second time I made this image. The first time, Barn Obscura, it had 3 images that were in the 2021 national competition at Soho Photo Gallery. So, but there was something compelling about this feeling, about this darkness around this beautiful farm, of these beautiful white trim barns, with red paint, and the horses that are on the main barn. And it was designed by Finn's father, Emmanuel, and he brought over Danish construction workers in the early 1960s to give them a chance to earn some money and build these barns according to his plans. Interesting, through this process of getting to know the family as well, and I consider them friends, it was learning that Finn's mother was a photographer developing her own film in the 1930s in Denmark. So I find that just amazing.
Yeah, and Lise, what initially captivated you to get ingratiated with this family? Can you remember the moment?
I think the first, I had driven past the farm for a while, and one morning I just decided that I would go there and photograph and see, just for a different experience. I had been photographing in the city, in Hoboken, along the Palisades, and all of which I enjoy very much. But in September 2019, I was looking to do something that I could feel that I could learn to express my own point of view, to develop a style, to develop a vision, and to express myself in ways that I maybe hadn't before. So being at the farm was part of it, but there could have been other things, such as when I was a kid driving up, we would drive up country to the farms, and I remember my father's mother telling me, sitting in the backseat of the car, giving me an apple we had just gotten and rubbing it on my pant leg and telling me, this is how you eat it, and telling me about her childhood growing up on a farm in another country. So I think those connections between family and land and soil are something innate. There's something that you just feel the connection with when you're there. It's not something I had planned. It's a kind of, in a way, it's a love story. In the best way. It's unexpected, totally unexpected, and And so, as was this photograph that I felt Rhonda reclined, which was a pivotal point in my photographing at the farm and understanding what I needed to do to make a photograph that I would really love. And so part of that was getting to know getting to know the animals, getting to know the horses, earning their trust, and trust enough to be so close that they wouldn't jump up when you were near them, that they wouldn't feel threatened. So this image of Rhonda recline has always been important to me through the process. Hella in the kitchen is another part of the everydayness of the project, while Finn and his brother-in-law Eric, Hella's husband, would be out tending to the farm, feeding the horses, dealing with cutting the lawn, whatever needed to be done. Hella would be in the kitchen and preparing meals, cleaning the house, taking care of chores. And there was some kind of chores in the home. And there was some kind of feeling that was like a retro feeling, that of something that you didn't expect to see still existing, but yet I just found it
It's like a time capsule. When were these shots taken?
Helen in the Kitchen was, I think, 2020, November 2020.
It's just interesting, you don't see any of the daily electronic device. You don't see a cell phone, you don't see a microwave, it's like a time capsule.
They don't have a microwave, but they do have cell phones, but they have flip phones. They don't have
flip
Wi-Fi.
phone, okay.
They have Wi-Fi. They don't have Wi-Fi.
Right.
So it is a step backwards, but they really value their tradition.
And that's fine. Yeah. You don't need it. Yeah. It's interesting to see it.
Closed Sunday. I found these signs as I was poking around the farm, and I hung them up, thinking, wanting to have that feeling that of what it was like when you drove by the farm and saw the signs hanging, and you either came in to buy your eggs or you thought, oh, I have to come back tomorrow. And so it was funny because when I told Helen that I was photographing the signs, she said, oh no, we have to fix them. So she keeps an immaculate house. Everything is in its place. And I was also taken by that. This is Kelly, and the first of the three horses, and to me, perhaps the most intelligent, because of how her wisdom, she just seemed to, she looked out for the other two horses. She was always aware of something that was not supposed to be present. And that's just, instinctive and in horses and other animals, but being so close to her, I really began to find a new sense of respect for her. And I kind of got the feeling as if she was looking out over her paradise, reclining or resting, before the long walk back, because they walk, if you see the barns, in the distance, they would walk up the meadow in the morning and sit on the upper hill, and then walk back down where you first saw that pastoral image of in autumn with the dark clouds, and rest here. I'm sorry, Frank, what were you going to say?
No, it's just interesting. Like some of the images are documenting, you're documenting a day in the life, and then some images you feel the difference. Like that is an art piece that is beautifully framed. Like this shot here, is very different than the shots that you have like sort of in the kitchen. Like this is, you know, it's just so right. Beautiful.
And thank you. And it was, some of them are just in that moment because, you know, if
Yeah.
you don't get that photograph right then when you see it, the horse is going to get up. And it happened many, many times. So I call this Kelly's gaze because for many reasons, and as this is Finn's gaze, you know, what happens with a farmer without land? There have been discussions about now with the ponies gone, developers have been interested in the property, and Finn was looking for life rights, but when they're not offered, he wasn't interested. And it's
What are life rights?
that he can still remain on the property, and they can work on, let's say, one half of the meadow, but leave his side alone, leave one side of where the barns and the house is alone.
That's an interesting topic because that could end up being heartbreaking for that man to, you know, to be sitting on his piece of land and watching, you know, a 5-story building go up, right? I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
And that almost happened next door to him, but instead the town offered a building in a commercial area where they could build a school. And now the house that they were residing in is leveled, so the land is available. Acres of land are available. And ideally, it would be, I think that maintaining rural traditions are important. I think that there's that wheel of progress. You can move so forward so far, but then you start going backwards. And I think that in a time, considering the times that we live in, undeveloped land is a commodity and it should be preserved and it should be protected. So, and this is Gritzy.
So, I mean, also shooting a project like this, you learn so much, right? You learn,
Right.
you know, about government, you learn about this, and you learn about people in the most intimate way. My God.
Yes, that's all true. And in a way that almost becomes familial, about their family, about their traditions, about the type of food they prepare. But here with Gritzy, I kind of felt this poignant moment. It was just, and especially now with the ponies gone. There was at one point talk about rescuing them, but it wasn't an option because of it was some considered them not to be in good health, not able to be trailered to a rescue that I found within a week of being asked to see if there was someone that could rescue them. But all that changed. And I understand, but I was still heartbroken. I called this Scythe and Shadow to demonstrate the end of what could be, the end of farming, the shadows, just to illustrate what the future could be.
And where are they now? What are they doing?
They are there.
They are still there. Wow.
They are there. Yeah.
They've been there.
Sorry? Winter's Poetry.
How long were they there for?
They have been there since, they have lived on the 5.5 acres since 1962, but Finn's father had been working for the former owner on the 85-acre property that reached across the Garden State Parkway since the 1950s, when he was hired as agricultural manager.
Wow.
Finn took over the farm in the 1980s when his father fell ill. And so that's like almost 40 years later, he's still there in his early 90s.
Is the father buried on the land?
No,
No.
no. But I've heard other things, like like friends who wanted to be buried there, and their ashes might be buried there, things like that. I call this sacred space, and I made this photo last year. This was the manger that the ponies lived in. It felt very silent and reverent. I've been going through photos for this project for quite a while now, over a year. For much of the project, I didn't look at everything. I looked at the ones that really jumped out on me. This one I found recently of Kelly looking back. This is what they call the runway that goes back from the fields to the stable. That also happens to run alongside the Garden State Parkway. Proposed plans for dividing up the 5.5 acre property. There were a few survey maps. This one is the most dramatic. Meadows missed. This land is still vibrant. It's still arable. There were vegetables grown here. There was a manure pile, a giant manure pile between the fences. And slowly, one of the people that help on the farm, they've been taking the fences down, opening up the space. I guess it's easier to cut the grass, trying to keep it clean and picturesque. And it's definitely picturesque. Oops. I had come across this quote from Andy Warhol and I loved it. And I think having land and not ruining it is the most beautiful art that anyone could ever want to own.
Perfect.
And I think that speaks to the importance of conservation and preserving land, because it's much more about the land. It's about what the surrounding areas, the animals that depend on the grass or the woods, the woodlands. There's woods that separate the properties here still. Once that's sold, it'll be gone.
And how often do you go back, Lise?
The past couple of weeks I haven't gone. I was there in December. I plan to go this week. So to see the family, and also to photograph. Because it's, for me, it's as long as they're there, I'd like to make pictures here. But one of the interesting things was that this farm project started a whole other interest in farming for me and in farms. And so I started photographing other farms in the area and in upstate New York, and becoming interested in I took a couple of farming workshops on biodynamics, and I'm just interested in the relationships that exist between the soil, what's beneath the soil, us. It's very complex, and there's a lot to learn, but I'm interested, and I'd like to still continue with these ideas.
You know, it's interesting how many times a photographer will take on a project and then it becomes a lifestyle and it becomes advocacy. You know, I've seen that so many times, whether it's the environment or, you know, young brides, you know, in the Middle East, you know, people take up these issues and it becomes a life's work. So that's very noble on your part. That's terrific. Yeah. So you also, Lisa, of course, have a standing offer, you know, to come back and keep on showing us new work. And you did a great job.
Thank you.
You
Thank
did,
you.
you did
And
it.
thanks for Helen and Alex for going ahead of me and paving the way with your beautiful work and showing
No,
me how how to do it well.
no,
Thank you.
that's it's also a story like that. There's so many layers to go back to old traditions, and are there recipes in her cookbook? Things that can just keep on going. But thank you very much. And Jay, why don't you open up? Anyone has any questions, you can put them into the chat room. The three photographers are still here. At least you should take a peek into the chat room there. There's a lot of beautiful, beautiful comments for you and for everyone. Um, and I think you'll garnish a lot of encouragement from those comments. So, if there are any questions, like I said, put in the chat room, or just raise your hand, or just shoot a question out. Um, and yeah, I mean, I have to say, Helen, you gave us sort of a science class there, and which was really fascinating. It's a sort of the same type of a thing. Like the advocacy of your education brings out such, a unique set of circumstances to discover more. And it feeds all parts of your brain that way, right? I mean, that must like occur to you while you're doing that, right?
Um, I'm
Just how
sorry.
it all connects.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always just looking at the connections. And I think one of the things that was exciting for me was right before I went, I actually had I didn't know if these applications take they're a long time in process. So in the meantime, I had the opportunity to be Baltimore ecosystem study artist in residence for a year, and I followed around scientists in the field and who were studying urban ecology in Baltimore and the Baltimore watershed. And that was my first opportunity to actually spend time with scientists instead of just reading about science. Um, and then I found, and maybe Lisa, you find this too with your farmers, is like when you start talking to these people and you learn about their world, you start seeing things differently. You start noticing things you wouldn't notice. I'm sure that I'm
I
sure
would
things about horses or farms or farming, or you're looking at the land in a very different way. And um, so that just continued once I got to Antarctica, just the opportunity to just be with people who were looking at things in a different way and learn from them. But then they sometimes said to me like that I was focusing on things and photographing things that like the mountaineers were saying, I would never have looked at that if I didn't see you like getting so interested in it. So
Mhm.
there was a kind of nice interchange around all that.
Yeah, and Alex, can you see yourself photographing glaciers, huge, huge pieces of stones and ice in the same way you would want to shoot the architects of New York?
Yeah, I would love to. But long before I came across her work, my my uh, my idea is one day to go to various places on Earth. Antarctica, one of them, Sahara Desert, Iceland, things like that. And I would like to be able to photograph. So I went looking for the project, but it's closed for this year. Um, but anyway, yes, I could see that. I could see that photographing the glaciers, not exactly like her, but then again, that's the idea, right? Not being exactly the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's and I'm sure Helen has a guiding service, that she's developing to take everybody who's on this call tonight to Antarctica, and she could show you how to do it and understand why. Um, but that's yeah, it's all yeah, it's really terrific. It's really a great evening. Ted, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Just thank you, Frank, and thank you everyone for participating. I know it's not always such an easy thing to do, especially if it's your first time presenting to a larger group. Uh, Everyone who's here, check out our website, the ASMP New York website. We have some other great programs coming up. And that's about it.
Great. Well, I mean,
Thank you,
I
everyone.
Ted, I got a quick question. What's the best way to sign up for ASMP?
What's the best way to do what?
To sign up for ASMP.
Go to asmp.org and you can, I can put it in here if you're in New York or if you're outside of New York. Yeah, go to asmp.org and look up your chapter, and they'll have the events by region. You can look up events nationally. Hmm? What?
Sign up for it.
This to sign up, and you can sign up for the newsletter. Here, asmp.org. It changes it to ASAP.
Thank you.
There, that's the national website. And from there you can get to New York or whichever chapter. There are chapters all over the country. But all of our online events are available to everybody. So that would be great.
great.
Love to have you.
And if, like I said, if anyone has any questions, now would be the time. But if not, thank you all for coming on and enlightening us with these three varied topics that were really fun. I mean, really, and very, very educational, all of it. And you have a standing offer to come back, and we'd love to see more of this and more of other work that you've done. So come back, Ted. I can't thank you enough for pulling this all together. And also a major shout out to Jay. Jay never gets enough credit for pulling all these presentations together and being the safety net for all of us. So with that, thank you. I know a storm's coming to the northeast there. So stay warm and dry, and we'll see you the next time.